First of all, for the thanks for taking some time to talk with us, Dr. Glover. Your book is fascinating, and we'll get into the particulars of your book. But for the podcast listeners, will you just paint a quick picture for us about where you are sitting right now and what's happening in your life this hour, this day?
Okay, Paul, good to be here. I am sitting in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. I live here, sitting in my office in my house. It's a beautiful, sunny, early April day outside. And where I'm at in my life is that, as you've mentioned, my book, it came out about 16 years ago. And since then, I've developed an online university where I teach self help courses. Been writing some more books, got another one about to come out for single guys on dating.
Mm.
I'm married and I'm parenting again. I've got a couple of step kids, 11 and 13. So, and that's to go with my 12-year-old granddaughter. That so just to tell you the ages of
Oh,
of, uh,
wow.
of I'm getting to raise kids all over again. My son's 33, and just having a good life. I get to travel a lot, do workshops and seminars. I get to work with a lot of men. I get to teach a lot, and life feels pretty good.
That's really cool. Um, a question just came to mind that I didn't actually have my notes initially, but I was listening to a bunch of interviews with you on other podcasts to prepare for this, and I heard you talking about your process in writing the book and how you got to a point
Hmm.
where it was really difficult to put out, and you were confronting all
Yeah.
kinds of fears. This wasn't on the docket, but I think this applies. Will you talk to me about a bit more about the imposter syndrome that you were fighting with at that point in your life?
Yeah. Well, kind of to back up a little bit on that, when I started writing what eventually became my book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, I
Yeah.
didn't set out to write a book. I had started working on me. I was having marital issues into my couple years into my second marriage. My wife told me, "You need to go get some help. I can't deal with your passive aggressiveness anymore." And I thought, well, if anybody needs help, it's you. You're the one that's angry all the time. You're
Right.
never happy. I tried to do everything to make you happy. Is never good enough. So I did. And I went to started going to 12-step program, started working with therapists. And then a little bit later, joined a men's group that I was in for several years.
Yeah.
And I began realizing that I had these covert contracts of a nice guy. And we can talk more about those later if you want. But basically, if I do everything right and treat people well, they'll treat me well and I'll have a good life.
Sure.
And my now ex-wife was right. I was passive aggressive. I was resentful. I gave to get. I had strings attached, and I started really kind of beginning to get a handle on this. And at the same time, I was a marriage and family therapist at the time.
Hmm.
So guys were coming to work with me, and they'd come in with their girlfriend, their wives, and they were saying the same things I was. I'm a great guy. I
Sure.
treat her better than her ex. I'm raising her kids. She's never happy. It's never good enough. When's it going to be my turn? She never wants to have sex anymore. She's angry all the time. And I thought, wow, I'm not the only guy that has this stuff going on. So I started my first No More Mr. Nice Guy men's group
Hmm.
probably 25 years ago now. And we met every other week. And I just started writing now we'd probably call them blogs. They were just, chapters, just whatever I was discovering about what I came to call nice guy syndrome, about me, about other men. And as I kept writing, guys kept saying, well, you need to write a book. You need to go on Oprah. And so I did keep writing over a period of about 6 or 7 years, sometimes writing more consistently than others. But what happened, when it came time to really kind of just wrap it up, say, okay, it's good enough. It's time to pull it all together. I got really stuck and I went months without touching it.
Mm.
And I realized, people were saying, you need to get your book out there. People need this book. My ex-wife kept saying, somebody else is going to put a book out there and they're going to beat you to the punch. And they were all right. And so yeah, I went back into therapy mainly to figure out why I couldn't finish the book. And as people are saying, you need to write a book, go on Oprah, it's going to be a bestseller, blah blah blah. It's kind of like, yeah, well, who am I to write a bestseller? Who am I
Uh-huh.
to go on Oprah? Kind of talk about that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I was just me. I just set out to write this stuff to kind of, that's what I do. I write. I didn't realize I was a writer at the time, but it's how I tend to express myself.
So you went to
So
therapy to
went
get the
back.
book out.
Yeah,
That's fascinating.
yeah.
What did you learn in therapy that was holding you back from pulling the trigger on this almost finished creation?
Primarily that I didn't have to do this perfectly. I didn't
Uh,
have to write a bestseller. I didn't have to go on Oprah. And the realization I came to is that when I started writing, it was just to give some information to the guys I was working with to help our work. And I realized, okay, I'm going to go back to that original objective.
mhm.
I'm just going to finish the book so I can have something to hand to my client. So I took the pressure off that it's got to be a bestseller, that people are going to want to read it, that it's got to get published, and just went back and from that point of view of just saying I just need to get it done so I can give to my clients. I had it done within a very short amount of time, so I took the pressure off, basically, that I didn't have to be some superstar or bestseller or whatever.
Like artistic performance anxiety.
That's a good term for it. And I've since discovered, and maybe that's why you asked the question. I've since discovered, in working especially a lot with men, that almost everybody, if you're actually accomplishing anything in life, has this, fear of being found out, this imposter syndrome. And really what I've come to realize is the more you challenge yourself in life and get out of your comfort zone and kind of keep pushing and you're gonna feel that. Well, who am I to be in this realm, this sphere? Doesn't matter if you're a musician, a poet, writer,
Yeah.
artist, vice president of a corporation. Everybody I've ever worked with has been fairly to highly successful, has had a fear of being found out, because we're always just a little bit out of our expertise if we're challenging ourselves.
So, what advice do you have for the people that are listening to this right now that have an almost finished creation and they're terrified of being found out? Like, what do you want them to know?
What I would say is just start sharing it with everybody you know. Just start sharing it just for to face the fear of putting it out into the world, because that's really what we're afraid
Yeah.
of. We'll put it out in the world. And I don't know about most people. I think most people might have a fear of failure. People say it's terrible, it sucks. We might have a fear of success. Well, what are the demands that are going to be put on me now if it is successful? I actually had a fear of, so what would be a good term for it? I had a fear of irrelevance, that I would spend 7 years writing a book, put it out there, and nobody would give a fuck. That was my big fear, you know,
Yeah.
that nobody would read it. It's kind of like okay, why'd I do that?
So it sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, like you finally had to accept the possibility that may be true. Is it? Is
I
that
did. I
fair?
finally accepted. No, it's perhaps nobody will ever read it. Maybe a few good friends and family members will buy a copy, and that might be it. I accepted that would be okay.
Interesting. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's good. I love hearing people's imposter syndrome stories. I deal with it all the time, and
Sure.
it's like you mentioned. I often hear very high performing people talking about their dilemmas with it too. It sounds common. So anyway, good stuff there. Good stuff. First, so getting into the book and the work, a lot of people have said to tell you thank you for doing it, and I personally would like to tell you that as well. I'm going to get into my reading notes and some notes from some of my listeners. So
Okay.
let's just
Let's
jump
do
into
it.
that. First observation: when I started putting out feelers in my social media, saying, "Hey, I'm interviewing Dr. Glover. Those of you who've read the book or have dealt with a nice guy, what are your questions?" And
Hmm.
what's interesting is I probably got more flack from women than I got questions from guys, for
Hmm.
because of the title of your book. No more Mr. Nice
Yeah.
Guy, a guide for getting what you want in sex, love, and work. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm not, that doesn't trigger all women, but it triggers a contingent of them. Why do you think that is?
Um, I can only guess, because I'm going to tell you my experience around that. When the book was put out, it was published originally by Barnes and Noble, who was just getting into the publishing industry, and I think they were actually a little bit excited that it might generate a little bit of gender blowback, that it might stir up some controversy,
Uh huh.
because that sells books, right? They were just looking at it from a dollar's point of view.
Sure.
Well, yeah, and it never has. It has never created as far as I know, any kind of conflict, in terms of whatever this subgroup of women is. Now, I occasionally will get emails. I get almost no negative email. Occasionally, internet trolls will post shit, but that's just what they do.
Sure.
I've got a folder in my email called my jackwagon file. When somebody writes me, and it's obvious they haven't even read the book, I have a good laugh. I share it with a friend or two and put it in the jackwagon file. But here's the thing: I get more of that from men than from women. The majority of the responses I get from women is twofold. One is, "Thank you for writing this book. It explains my husband, or it explains my ex."
Right.
And they'll say, "And I got a lot out of it as well. Did you know of a book for women along these lines?" And honestly, since maybe in 16 years since the book came out, maybe I've gotten at the most five negative reactions from women that you could tell had not read the book and just went on the attack, maybe based on the title of it.
Right.
And the ones that do attack, I'm going to probably mispronounce the word, vehemently. They it's like, I'm a Neanderthal, I'm corrupting men, I'm ruining the world, I'm a fraud.
Yeah.
Once I'm going to get your California psychologist license revoked, and well, I'm not a psychologist and I don't practice in California, but
Right.
knock yourself out. But I've not gotten that negative blowback, because really
That's
the
awesome.
book is about men being conscious and honest and transparent,
Right.
and showing up in relationship and life and being trustworthy. And so, yeah, in general, the women, if they actually read it and go into it, women seem to be very positive about it. I mean, I can't tell you how many men have written me and say, "I love your book. My wife gave it to me," or "My ex-girlfriend gave it to me." A lot of guys get the book from women. So I think maybe social media has something to do with that reaction, that people just feel free to say whatever the fuck they want,
Right.
on
Right.
Facebook or Twitter. It's kind of like, "I'm an expert. I haven't read the book, but I'm going to give an expert opinion on it."
Sure.
Yeah.
Based on your title, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
So another question, Grant asks, what factors led to the creation and proliferation of nice guys? Were they, like how are they born? And I know you get into this.
I do address
in
that in the book.
You do. You
Yeah.
definitely do get into the book. Can I go a little deeper on that? There's
Sure.
a theory that I've heard, and it goes like this. It goes essentially, this happened with the Industrial Revolution. Industrial Revolution takes separates men and boys. Dad doesn't work with boys anymore. Now boys, dad's off in the city working. Now this puts extra workload on mom. And then the world wars happen, and then men go away. They come back injured and hurt and less able to show up as men. And then women's liberation shows up, both out of necessity in a couple of ways, because it's the right thing,
Yeah.
and also because they just needed to fill in some shoes. And blah blah blah. I don't need to fill that whole thing out. Do you subscribe to that point of view?
Well, and that's basically kind of the general overview I share in the book itself, and stuff where I think this came from. Now, I finished writing the book about 20 years ago,
Yeah.
and I've continued to do my own process around as a recovering nice guy. I've continued to work with countless men and relationships as well. And so what I'm actually seeing is it seems like this whole nice guy syndrome. I'm a baby boomer. I began first seeing it among guys my age, but now a lot of the nice guys I work with will say, "Oh, my father was a nice guy. He gave me no guidance. Basically all he taught me about women is don't piss your mother off."
Yeah.
And so what my deepest sense of the two energies that are creating just more and more young men that are becoming more and more passive, more and more just got nothing going on in their lives, is that disconnection from men. Almost any problemed young man you meet, teenager or young adult, if he's depressed or anxious or underachieving, almost always they had no good connection
Right.
with a man or men growing up. Kind of they've lacked that initiation into the challenging world of the masculine. And many have been primarily raised by their mothers, go through a school system that's primarily female. And the other part of it is what's really interesting to me is I was in graduate school in the 1980s. So kind of like the wave of feminism had hit, it had begun to affect graduate school. And so in my child development courses, the feminist teachers taught that all little boys and girls are born exactly the same,
Oh,
tabula rasa, blank slate,
sure.
and that gender is the societal construct imposed on boys and girls. Like boys don't cry, girls have to be passive, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the kind of the core message was that boys are competitive, that's bad. Girls are cooperative, that's good. And so out of that, this was in my human development study. So that now has become kind of the primary message that like that teachers hear when they're getting their college education and then they go on to be educators,
Right.
is they're hearing that everything about masculinity is bad. Even the term toxic masculinity, you never hear anybody speak of toxic femininity, but
Right.
it's an easy target to go after anything that men do that is shitty, and we do shitty things.
Mm-hmm.
So but to blanket everything that's masculine is bad, like quote, quote, competition's bad. Well, no, it can be very positive. But
Right.
here's to me the irony out of that movement is you look at most like 20 something women, young women, they're competitive as hell. They've grown up playing
Right.
soccer, they're in the business world, they're competitive.
Yep.
And if you look at a lot of 20 something young men, they're as passive as hell. And it's like they can't leave their mom's basement because they're smoking dope, playing video games, surfing the internet. So what's happened, I think that's been a big part of it, is even in our educational system, the girls have actually been encouraged to be competitive, and anything that the boys do that reeks of competitiveness is squashed. Now,
Certainly.
I'm not one of those people that I'm not a big blamer. I'm not into blaming, but as you've asked the question, that I really see that that's the core pieces. The boys have not had connection with father, primarily
Mm-hmm.
raised by mothers, and grown up in educational systems that have not been favorable towards boys.
And this reminds me of the quote from Fight Club, where
Yeah,
Tyler Durden says, "We're a generation of men raised by women. I'm wondering if another woman is really the answer we need." And
I love that line. I quote it all the time.
so it begs the question, like, where to from here? Because it's true that there's so many. That it seems to be a self-perpetuating problem. Nice guys aren't able to sustain families. Like, I'm a divorced, recovering nice guy too. I'm part of this whole process, and
Yeah.
and so broken homes are proliferating. There are more and more women are having to wear all the hats, and these it seems to be snowballing. I'm curious what you see as a way forward. Like,
Okay.
how are we going to?
That's a good question, and actually, I do have some thoughts about it. Um, I'll back up again. When we were shopping No More Mr. Nice Guy, when my agent was trying to find a publisher,
Yeah.
a lot of editors at big publishing companies said, "We like your book, but our marketing department says men won't buy a self-help book."
Mm-hmm.
Well, you probably work a lot with a lot of men. That's not true.
They totally
Especially
do,
with
Brian.
Amazon. Men buy
Yeah.
books all the time,
Yeah.
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, my royalty checks get bigger every year. The
Cool.
book has continued to sell well. So men do buy books.
Mm-hmm.
But the other piece was when I did a book tour when the book got launched back in 2003. And a question I was asked a lot is, did I see like a worldwide men's movement coming? And my answer was no, for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't think there was one unifying factor like there was with feminism. There were a few unifying factors
Right.
that brought women together. So I didn't think there was a unifying factor. And I'll go out on a limb and I'll say I think that feminism succeeded to the degree that it did because of men. Because good men realized, okay, this isn't fair. This isn't right. Women do need equal opportunity, equal pay, and men, legislators, judges, university presidents started making changes. So
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really see that there would be a worldwide men's movement. Now, fast forward to what is this, 2019 now, I actually believe there is, but not how I thought it might happen. What I actually see, and maybe because of the proliferation of the internet and because there's a lot of lost men out there, is men actually now go looking for answers to their lostness. Maybe they don't know what that looks like. Maybe it's young men and, they go looking for pickup on the internet.
Right.
Maybe it's guys that are struggling with drugs and alcohol and they go to 12-step program. Maybe it's men that are going through a divorce or struggling with the relationship, so they seek out a men's group. Maybe as guys find, Mankind Project and go do an initiation weekend. But what I'm finding is that men are coming into what I'll call this movement from all different directions with different reasons, but they all have a inside. There's an angst inside. There's an existential sense of lack. They don't know what it is. They may think, well, I need to be able to pick up women and get laid, or I need
Yeah.
to learn how to make my wife happy, or I need to learn how to become an entrepreneur and make millions of dollars. Whatever it is, the internet now provides a format and a venue to go find coaches, programs, and it's like men's programs have just proliferated. Like, I do several interviews a month with
Right.
people with podcasts. That didn't exist 25 years ago when I started looking for answers. Back then, it was basically, Iron John, Robert Bly, go out in the woods, pound a drum, and take the talking stick and say ho, and that was good stuff, but that's about all there was.
Mm.
Now every issue a man has, he can find resources, and to me, what is most helpful is that he can find a way to connect with other men who are working on the same issue in their life, and that's what brings us
Ah.
back to tribal initiation, where men, no matter what their
Yeah.
problem is, I think they're seeking initiation into the masculine. And now those tribes are forming in lots of different forms all over the world, and they're easier to find. I'm in a men's group now, with a guy who's worked with David Data for countless years. And I was in his program last year. I'm in it again this year. This year, there's going to be 50 guys in the program. We'll
Mm.
have 3 retreats. We meet every 2 weeks for video conferences. And it's
Nice.
like, I'm in heaven. I've got my tribe now. So that's where I think this is where we're going. And that's where I think there's some really good answers out there.
So you're pretty hopeful then about the direction of things. It sounds like you see a rising tide.
I'm hopeful, and again, I'll go out on another limb. I think with feminism, women kind of kicked men's asses. And kind of, when we men get our asses kicked, we either can kind of shut down and lick our wounds, or we can go find resources and raise our game.
Right.
I think the Me Too movement has also, to a degree, kicked men's asses, and rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
But here's what I think is going to happen. Or here's what I think is happening, is that I think the women's movements have gotten stuck and are not serving women anymore. I think just giving women a venue to be pissed off and like you say, write shit on the internet, on Facebook, blah 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 blah. How's that going to move women ahead at all? Being being perpetual victims and being stuck and just whining about it. Again, I'm making some generalizations. I think men, having gotten our asses kicked, men are now seeking how to grow in consciousness, how to grow in presence, how to grow in a healthy masculine
Mm.
strength. And I think it is men that are going to lead the way back for women to actually get to experience maybe what they've been wanting to experience all along, a depth of connection and love
Mm.
and validation that I don't think feminism can give them. And so I actually am very positive. I think we men are probably going to leapfrog where the women are at. We're going to have to lead them forward. And again, maybe that's
Wow.
going to piss a few women off, but I see that as a good thing, actually.
That's fascinating. Because you know what's interesting is every strong woman I talk to is strong and will also say that she really appreciates a strong man that knows how to lead.
Uh-huh.
Strong women
Well, of
cannot
course they do.
stand weak men.
They don't. They just want to spit them out. They're
Yeah.
just, they chew them up. And I have
Mhm.
had that exact same experience. And I've worked with a lot of women in couples counseling. Every woman I've been with, so my wife, we've been together now about 2.5 years. She's Mexican, grew up 8 of 10 kids in poverty. Man, she works out 2 hours a day. She's done Mai Tai. She kicked my ass, and she's strong. She gets shit done. And here's what I found, and again, using terms that probably is better if we can define them a little bit, but I find that often the strongest women also have a really strong feminine side to them. And for
Yes.
many, because of their feminine side makes them feel vulnerable, they've gone out, like I've said, they've learned to kick ass.
Yes.
But yet and then they come home every day and they go, I'm tired of kicking ass.
I've seen the
I
same
I want
thing.
to just melt into a man who has a sense of strength and presence and consciousness about him.
Yeah.
And not that he's going to control them or tell them what to do or take care of them the rest of their lives, but where they can just relax into the conscious masculine presence. And I've found every strong woman I know, like you say, I don't want a weak mommy's boy. I want a man that can go toe to toe with me, hold his consciousness, hold his presence, be loving in ways that just, penetrate my heart.
Mm.
And yeah, strong women want a strong guy.
What does that mean to hold presence? In what you just said there, these strong women want a man who can hold presence, go toe to toe with her, and hold his presence. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Yeah, well, that can mean a lot of different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A term that I use in some of my materials for men about conscious leadership and relationship is being a good ascertainer. Because like a lot of times men will ask me, okay, my girlfriend or my wife has this reaction. What do I do? And I go, well, actually, if you go looking for, this canned response to it, the response is probably going to be terrible. It's probably going to, piss you both off. But as an ascertainer, if a man is not in a heightened anxiety state, if he's calm, if he's continuing to breathe and view the situation and just can intuitively ask what is most needed here in this
Mm.
situation, he can bring that. And it might be different in every context. I
Mm.
know with my second wife, when she was kind of reactionary, I'd say, get on the floor, we're going to wrestle. And we would wrestle. And she absolutely loved that. Other women I've been with is kind of like, get your clothes off and get in my bed. And they would love that. Others is bring them in and just hold them and nibble on their neck and say,
Mm.
do you know how fucking sexy you are and how much you amaze me? And so there's no one canned response. But I found when a man, especially if he's not triggered into an anxiety state, and
Yeah.
if he does have a deep sense of love and respect for the person he's with, his response may be different in every context, but yet it'll be coming from that kind of conscious place. Kind of, I've heard people say hold space, hold frame, hold consciousness. It's kind of like on the dance floor. I learned a salsa
Mm.
dance. I'd be dancing with women that, they want a back lead. They want to help you out. They're moving you around. And once I got decent at it, I would just pull them in, get my frame a little more, a little stronger. And I'd whisper in their ear, let me lead.
Yeah.
And you would not, if you've danced, you'll get this. But I can't tell you how many women, they would all like shake their arms like this, just shake their arms and go, I know, I have a hard time letting go of control. And that's what a lot of it is that if as a feminine creature, a woman's felt vulnerable most of her life, they've got to take control of the situations they're in. They couldn't trust their daddy. They couldn't trust their first boyfriend. They couldn't trust the men they've been with. So they take control. And so when a man can just kind of hold his frame, stay conscious, stay present,
Mm.
keep breathing. Anxiety is contagious because we're emotional herd animals, but calm is contagious as well. So when a man can kind of just hold that presence of calm love and respect, it penetrates a woman and other people, children, dogs, cats, coworkers. It penetrates them as well.
I love that. I love that. That's so good. Oh, our time is running, so I want to jump into more questions. I wish I could go deep into each of these rabbit holes. Um, Another question that came up. Let's see. Um, this could take forever. Rachel asks, "What's your take on borderline personality disorder, and what is the effect on recovery for the talk a little bit about the recovery for the borderline and the codependent because they are often like this."
Yeah, they're often like that.
Well, and I
That
should say, I need to say for audio sake, I'm we're doing a video chat right now. Like I should restate that the borderline and the codependent for my audio listeners, podcast listeners, which is pretty much all of you. Borderlines and codependents usually are a match made in hell. Where there's a borderline, there's almost always a codependent. It
yes,
seems.
that my first experience with this was in my second marriage. I was the codependent. My second wife was the borderline. And we did tons of therapy. She actually liked going to therapy. And she said one time that she calculated between us, we'd probably spent $100,000 on therapy.
Oh my God.
And I now joke that's probably 85,000 too much to find out a relationship wasn't going to work. I think 15 grand, $15,000 is enough to find out if you guys are going to make it.
Okay.
But but here's the thing: in all of that therapy, nobody ever diagnosed my ex as borderline. She even asked me, "Do you think I'm borderline?" And I was a therapist. But here's the thing: in the therapy world, the problem is the term borderline is a terrible name, and it kind of originated out of, well, these people that have these traits are not so severe that they're schizophrenic or
Hmm.
psychotic, but they're a lot crazier than the average neurotic, right? So they're borderline, they're in between neurotic, and so it's a terrible terminology.
Mm.
Another problem with the diagnosis is that it has such a basket of stuff that goes with it, all the way from mood volatility to feelings become facts to, in relationship they can be very seductive in pulling people in, but as soon as you get close they push you away. They typically can't be alone, but they can't be close.
Mm.
They'll love you one minute, hate you the next. And it is often accompanied by secondary diagnosis like cutting or addictions,
Yeah.
and suicidal ideation.
Right.
Now, here's probably the biggest problem of all, is that in general, women are diagnosed in terms of women to men like 4 to 1.
Right.
It tends to be, and so feminists have tended to say it's a disparaging term towards women. It's putting women in this basket that because they're moody or this or reactionary, they're borderline. Now there is difference. Now, in terms of the therapeutic approach, probably the world's leading therapist and worker on this is a woman named Marsha Linehan in Seattle at the University of Washington. She,
Mm.
she and her team have written several books. She is also borderline. Now, the thing in terms of, for a long time, no one knew what caused borderline. They thought, well, maybe it's childhood sexual abuse because it seemed like that seemed to come up a lot. Now the theory is pretty much it's passed on from mothers to daughters.
Mm.
Um, but it's still kind of vague as to what are the cause and exactly how you define it. And again, a lot of therapists don't want to, either have not been trained, so don't know how to diagnose it, or they don't want to diagnose a woman in a way that seems disparaging to women. And a lot of therapists are codependent. They don't want to tell somebody who already feels
Yes.
you already feel terrible about yourself. Now I'm going to tell you you're borderline. Oh shit! I knew I was a terrible person.
Yeah.
So therapists get codependent. But here's the thing: if somebody had told my ex and I that she was borderline, I didn't discover it till after I got divorced and was reading a book called Stop Walking on Eggshells.
Hmm.
And I thought, this is my wife. Why didn't anybody tell us this? If she and I had known, I don't know if we would have stayed together. I don't know. But we would have had better insight and tools for actually working with what was going on, and she and I could have gotten better therapy to help us move forward with that. So I actually think it is probably a good thing to diagnose as a therapist. And
Mm.
every person I've ever talked with about the possibility that they're borderline, after they go read a little bit, like go read on Wikipedia and read about borderline, they come back and they go, "Yep, I check off all the boxes. That's me." I go, good. Now we can work with it. We know
Hmm.
what we're working with now, and now we can help you learn to be the observer of your thought processes, not the believer of them. Learn to soothe yourself and moderate your reactions. Learn to watch the certain behaviors you have of
Mm.
pulling people in and pushing them away. Really, a lot of it is really around mindfulness and cognitive behavioral techniques. So I don't know that anybody working with this says there's a cure, but once a person recognizes, okay, this is what I'm struggling with, and most of the women I've worked with that have it, yeah, they'll say the same thing. I get with these guys and I eat their lunch. I usually go either get with a guy who treats me like shit because that feels familiar to me, or I go get with this really nice guy and I just eat his lunch, and then they feel bad about themselves because they walk all over the codependent.
Right.
So I don't know if this kind of filled in the blanks of what you're looking for, but nice guys do tend to get involved a lot with borderlines and narcissistics and unrecovered sexual abuse survivors. That's such a common dynamic for codependence.
That is a whole other hour-long conversation in and of itself.
At least,
At
yeah.
least. Yeah, yeah. That being said, and maybe we can catch up on that another time, I want to get to a couple of other questions before time runs out. In your book, you talked about this idea of healthy masturbation. And I thought it was so interesting because you unpack the idea that in masturbating in a lot of senses for guys becomes a dissociative state. And because
Yeah.
you're taking your mind and your energy into this other place that doesn't actually exist, and it kind of sets up some bad conditioning, which leads me to ask, I'm curious about your take on pornography. Like, what? Just first glance, what's your quick take on porn, and then I want to unpack it a little bit.
Okay. I think in general, porn is terrible for men.
Okay, why?
Now that's not okay. And I want to put out that I'm not saying that from a judgmental point of
Sure,
view
we're not
or a
moralizing
moral.
here. No, we're just
Yeah,
talking about the
I
gears
just
that
work with a
work.
lot of guys.
Yeah.
It's bad for us men in a lot of reasons. Number one, it sublimates our sex drive. A sex drive is supposed to drive you to real life people, not to your hand or the computer screen. It addicts you to fetishes that you can only be aroused by this thing. Blondes with big boobs, and if a woman isn't blonde with big boobs, you can't even be attracted to her or aroused by her. What happens then when you start having sex with a real live person is kind of like real life people don't even excite you. They're just like, so most men go into fantasy states while they're having sex with a real live person, which I say in my book, that's like, going to a buffet meal and fantasizing about a Big Mac. It makes absolutely no sense. You're actually naked. Yeah. Yeah. You're naked with a real live human being. This is every boy's childhood dream to get
Sure.
naked with a real live person. And we're fantasizing about something we saw in porn, whatever got us most aroused because we've really honed that fetish.
Yeah.
And beyond that, it's a fucking waste of time. It's like spending 3 or 4 hours on the internet every night looking for digital cameras you're not going to buy. It's a fucking waste of time. And then the other piece is most single guys have this belief, well, once I get into a relationship, I'll quit jerking off and I'll quit looking at porn. They don't. They never do, because it is safe sex. You're not dealing with a real live person with moods and desires and insecurities and body image issues. And so what happens, as a marriage therapist, I've worked with so many couples where the woman finds out her man's looking at porn. She's devastated. He feels like shit. He promises to quit. Back in the day, you threw out your magazines and your discs. Now you erase your cash or your cookies.
Right.
And then, but like most addictions, it's not a stopping problem.
Sure.
It's a starting problem. Sure. Every addict has quit, but they start again.
Certainly.
And what happens, so my general read on most guys that get hooked on porn is not so much a sex addiction as it is a shame addiction. Feeling bad about themselves feels normal, and wasting a lot of time masturbating to porn, especially if somebody's going to judge you or have their feelings hurt or be pissed off at you, just puts you in this amazing shame container that almost nothing else can match. And what I found is if you can help guys break their shame around it, most guys actually in time realize that porn is really boring. It's repetitive, boring shit.
It always ends the same
if they're
way.
in that shame place, it seems to always end the same way. Yeah. Depending on whatever your particular fetish is. But mainly it disconnects men from themselves, from their just kind of their inherent, evolved sexuality. It disconnects them from real life people, whether they're straight or gay, it doesn't matter. So to answer your question, in general, I don't think it's good for men.
I like that answer. That was good and clear. Another question, kind of related to that, in your book, you said something I haven't been able to stop thinking about, and that is that for nice guys, recovering nice guys would do well to put off sexual connection for a while in the dating process, because as you said, when the sex starts, the learning stops.
Yeah.
So I think that's pretty easy to digest, but is it possible to put off the sex for too long? Like, What's your guidance for guys to help them know, like, okay, this is like, what is the sweet spot for when it's okay to like let those sexual energies flow in the dating
Okay.
process?
Yeah, I wish I could just give you a formula. And I'm not saying that guys ought to wait 6 months or wait till marriage or whatever. I
Sure.
think actually being sexual is part of the growth process. And one way that you get to know a person as you become more intimate and vulnerable with each other.
Definitely.
So it's a
Yeah.
powerful part. What I'm primarily referring to is that typically, when a man and woman get together and they've got some chemistry, if the woman is willing, usually they're having sex for a second date, and just right away, getting naked. Now, yeah, this is fun, but I tell guys, all right, if you're going to start. I'm doing relationship in quote marks with my
Right.
fingers for those listening. If you're going to start a relationship based on that, don't fool yourself into thinking that this is in general going to turn into kind of a healthy bonded long-term relationship. It's sex. Okay, let it be sex. Fine,
Mm,
that's okay. Now, my belief is, and this has been my experience over and over again. I'm in my third marriage. I've had a number of relationships. I think it takes probably up to 3 years to really know a person well, to know the depths of who they are, for
right.
them to feel safe and vulnerable enough to reveal all aspects of themselves.
Mm,
But typically, as soon as we start having sex with somebody, they can have red flags up the yin yang. Oh, they drink too much. They're on Facebook with their ex and a lot of other guys. They've got these anger issues. They accuse you of shit. You've only gone on 2 dates, but you're having sex, so you start doing everything in your power to manage all of these red flags because you want to get fucked again tomorrow night. All right, so that's where the learning stops.
sure.
Is that all we're thinking about is how do I maintain the availability of this person as a sexual partner? And that's not a good way to build a relationship.
Right.
It's how most of us do it, but it's not a very good way to build a relationship. So, in my experience, when I was kind of in my dating heyday and I was looking more to where my dating would lead to relationship, I typically would go at least a month, probably a couple months without sexual contact. Now, with that said, I'm a very affectionate guy,
Hmm.
and women tend to find me pretty affectionate and playful, and usually they want to go really quick with being sexual. I hold hands a lot. I like to kiss. I'll lead them. I'll be playful. I'll kind of lovingly dominate,
You're a
and
great
just
dancer.
women. Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if I can claim that, but but women enjoy that, and then they want to go quickly. So what I've
Right.
found, and this is, I think this is actually a great way to kind of keep men out of becoming a Me Too morality tale, is that when men are pushing to have sex and they're trying to get a woman to have sex, that's when women tend to feel violated, because basically we've targeted them and they're an object that we want to stick our dick into,
Right.
and that's when women feel violated, and for good reason. But here's my experience: if a guy will create what I call a lot of positive emotional tension, set the tone and lead, be honest, be playful, kind of mix it up like on the dance floor, be physically affectionate, the women are the ones that become the sexual provocative. I, I don't know how to say the word. I don't
Like initiator
know
or
how to write it. They're the ones that actually get assertive. Yeah, provocateurs. They become the initiators. And so what I found, I tell guys, if you want to avoid being a Me Too casualty tale, don't push for sex. Don't push a woman for anything,
right.
but show up, be playful, lead, be conscious. And when the woman starts giving you the clear signals, like she's the one taking her clothes off or putting her hands down your pants, and you're the one saying, "Okay, we need to talk," and then we'll move forward. Um,
And what is that
and I
talk,
think,
by the way, when you say we need to
well,
talk?
I call that the pre-sex talk. And this scares the shit out of most men, because most men, once they've got a woman in the mood, they think if they do anything to blow it, they're not going to get laid. But the pre-sex talk is where, before clothes come off, you as the man, you take the lead here and you say, "Let's talk. It looks like clothes are about to come off. Let's just talk about some core stuff. Let's talk about protection. Let's talk about STDs. Let's talk about unwanted pregnancies.
Right.
Let's just put everything out on the table, have a basically a 3 to 5 minute conversation. And then if we both feel comfortable, we move forward."
Mm.
Now, guys think, well, I've given the woman enough alcohol. She's in the mood. I can't kill
Oh,
the buzz. I've found with having that pre sex talk in general makes women feel safer,
Right.
And because it's the questions they have in their head, they're about to get naked and they don't know, does this guy have a condom in his pocket? What if this,
Sure.
what if that? They And so by talking about it, they feel safer. They're more relaxed. They open up more.
Hmm.
And then typically what I tell the woman is say, hey, let's take the agenda out of this. Let's just get naked, roll around together, enjoy each other's bodies, and let's just let it go where it goes. And the
Oh.
women are all going, yeah, yeah, they're taking their clothes off with that. That's just like the biggest turn on. There's no pressure, there's no agenda.
Mm.
We're just going to go, get to know each other's bodies.
That's cool. That's very cool. So you're not really advocating here that pre-sex talk should include things like, just so you know, I'm not looking for a relationship. Or are you should that be part of the conversation too? Like looking for like I'm this emotionally
we guys,
available. What about you?
I know what you're talking about because I've done that, and almost every time I did that, the women say, "Just shut up and fuck me." When we're doing it, we're doing that because we're afraid that they're going to think we're in a relationship now, we're exclusive. And I found that most women, at least the women I dated, were intelligent enough to know, fucking a guy on a third date is not a commitment to a long term relationship. It was like, we want to have sex. We're adults. We're going to have sex. Now, if we can talk about other things as we move forward, but that's usually just out of the guy's anxiety.
Mm,
And I found that once a woman's ready to have sex, she wants the guy to shut up and just, let's get on with it.
that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure there are a lot of ladies that are clapping their hands right now at that. So,
Yeah, there's probably a few
yep,
clapping and a few
yep.
saying, he's a misogynist. Either way, it's okay. It's okay.
Well, hey, Dr. Glover, we're coming up at the top of the hour, and it is time for us to get on to our next appointments. Thank you so very much for your time.
Paul, this was a blast. Thank you for your questions. I had fun, and hopefully it was helpful to the people listening.
It's brilliant. Thank you, sir.